Mr. Crispin here once again. In today's video I'm going to be putting together a collet chuck for the Myford lathe. It's been on the to-do list for a while and the day's come and I've decided to film it. Now this is a fairly straightforward task on the face of it, so perhaps of more interest to the beginner. However, as I've been doing it I've had a few ideas that I'm hoping the more experienced among us can comment on. We'll get straight into it, so here goes. So the assembly of this collet chuck is as follows. On the Myford spindle nose we have a thread 1 1/8 by 12 TPI, onto which screws a cast iron backing plate, and onto the backing plate goes the collet chuck, and that is retained in position by means of 3 screws coming from the back into tapped holes. Now we need to achieve good radial and axial alignment, not to mention good concentricity, and the best way I can think to do that is to machine the back face and the location diameter in situ. Now this back plate has already had a previous life and it already has a diameter machined on it. It's slightly undersized, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just machine it all off and start again. So preparation wise, the first thing I'm going to do is remove any high spots from this mating surface, and 0 points I know for using the lathe bed as a workbench. To clean this internal thread out, I normally find it useful to use this little device, which is a piece of brazing rod bent up with the 2 ends filed to a sharp corner, so that I can get right into the bottom of the thread form and clean everything out. I just use a toothbrush then, and I'll do this several times, but that'll be the cleaning of that. And then as far as the external thread goes, I'll just use a toothbrush and some cloth and get it nice and clean. So we're all clean now, and the reason I've tried to be thorough with that is to give myself the best chance of repeatability going forward. So because I know it was all cleaned at the initial setup, when I come to put it on in the future, I know that if I clean it, it should go back on something like it is now. If it was dirty at this stage and I machine it, then next time I put it on, it's unlikely to go back in the same place. Okay, so I'm not going to get rid of all of it because it actually gives me a handy guide for what rough size to machine down to. Now I don't want to go too thin here, so I'm just going to take it back 150 thou, which will leave me plenty here for strength. Nearly there. Well, this part now fits onto here, so that's the machining done. Now with mating parts of this style, there is one thing to bear in mind before you end up with a problem. And the problem would be that if these faces tried to mate with these faces, you would have an amount of fouling going on in the corners. So this corner would foul with this radius and this corner would foul with that radius. Now you do have options, and I've tried to illustrate these somewhat. You could have a small chamfer and a larger chamfer to leave you a gap in the middle when the faces mate. You could have a square corner and a break edge with a radial undercut. You could have a radius and a chamfer, as long as the radius was smaller than the chamfer. You could have a square corner and a break edge with an axial undercut. You could, in this example, have different size radii, so one small radius against a larger radius and a small radius against a larger radius there, again to leave you with gaps. Or if you wanted to get really technical, you could have a corner relief. Slightly more tricky to do on round components, but still possible, or just something simple like a squarish corner and a chamfer. And most of the time these kind of things are going to be down to your available tools. For instance, what size corner radius you can have is quite often going to be down to what inserts or tools you can grind. But it's worth thinking about, and it's worth trying to design out, because some of these foulings may be very slight and not noticeable during inspection. So the problem's been solved in this case by, on this side, having a tool radius that is smaller than the chamfer, and on the front side, although there's a break edge, it doesn't really matter because this surface isn't going to come anywhere near this surface. So I'm going to assemble this now using these little screws, and you'll notice they have a thinner head than the traditional cap screw, and because I don't need a huge amount of strength in this application, I've opted for the thinner head just because there's less for it to catch on as it spins round. So on to assembly and inspection. I've already cleaned everything, and these, by the way, are ER40 collets, and as with any ER collet, the collet goes into the nut and then the whole lot goes into the taper. And to inspect this setup, I'm just going to use a piece of silver steel, or drill rad as our American friends like to call it. And the whole lot tightens up there with the aid of a C-spanner, and we can now get a verdict. So this being a 2 micron clock, we've got about 0 to plus 16 plus 18, so yeah, about 16-18 microns run out. The actual numbers don't matter here, it's the difference between them. Now as we go down longitudinally, it's not bad, but that could also be down to headstock alignment. It's more the radial run out I'm interested in, and down here we've got about 0 to minus 12, 14, so I'm happy with that. So that's how it's come out. Now as for my discussion topic, would it have been better to do the following? What if I had machined the location diameter undersized slightly to give me enough play to fully clock this in, and then once clocked in I could remove it and put 3 dowels in the back so it wouldn't go anywhere? Or what if I had machined this counterbore deeper so I could make the boss inside longer to give me enough room to put 4 grub screws in through the sides, and give me almost like a 4-jaw motion where I could clock it in and be radially supported? I'm not sure. For the intent and purposes of this machine, 18 microns is fine. And not to mention, of course, that this is a screw-on spindle fitting, which I doubt has quite the same repeatability as any of the tapered fittings anyway. So any thoughts on that would be interesting. Now just before I go, a quick word on collets. I mentioned there I was using ER40 collets, and that's primarily because somebody gave me them, but why ER40 collets over any of the other type of collets I might have? And the answer to that is that an ER collet has 2 opposing angles and is split from both ends. And that means that as you squeeze it, the bore remains parallel. So this collet, for instance, will hold any parallel diameter within a 1mm range. And with a set of them, I can hold any diameter from 3mm to 25mm. Now that's handy for work holding, because you aren't always dealing with a round number. These traditional collets, say a couple of decal collets there, 5C collet, Bridgeport collet here, they are all what I would call more of a nominal size collet, where they're very good at holding a particular size, but it needs to be pretty near the particular size for them to work. Any bigger and you struggle to fit the piece in at all, any smaller and you end up with the situation I've got in this drawing here, where the front of the collet ends up gripping a lot harder than the back, and this could give you an amount of waggling in the worst case, or even in the best case it might hold the part but give you varying or unexplainable results. So that's why the ER collet has been chosen this time. Also they're quite short, which means you don't have too much stick out from the spindle. They're by no means the only work holding collet, but quite a handy one. So that's it for today. I hope you found that interesting, and see you on the next video.